In the wake of that gross stunt in which Florida Governor Ron DeSantis essentially human trafficked about 50 migrants to an island off the coast of Massachusetts last week, Texas authorities have now opened a criminal investigation into how DeSantis lured the unsuspecting migrants to be flown across the country and stranded. That, and according to Rolling Stone, Donald Trump is fuming, reportedly telling allies and confidants he's outraged that DeSantis seems to think he's allowed to steal the ex-president's mantle as both media star and as undocumented immigrant basher-in-chief. Makes sense that Trump is feeling threatened by DeSantis because the Republican establishment is obviously desperate to find a way to sustain Trumpism without Trump himself. And a lot of them think that Ron DeSantis is the man for that job. That is partially because the Florida governor is willing to do things as despicable as paying someone, we still don't know who, to lie to migrants and drop them off on a tiny Massachusetts island where they are removed from any possible family, court dates, or social networks. And the smarter members of the Republican establishment also understand that Donald Trump is deeply unpopular. Just 34% of registered voters have a favorable opinion of him right now, according to a recent NBC News poll. Of course, the ex-president is also facing multiple possible indictments, which, again, doesn't add up to an ideal nominee for a major party in 2024. Now, in comparison, DeSantis does look like the better bet. But I got to say, I don't think DeSantis has yet proven himself to be some kind of like once-in-a-generation political talent. He's won one statewide election, currently leading the polls for re-election in Florida, a state that has not elected a Democratic governor in 30 years. I'm not quite convinced that this kind of constant culture war trolling is as broadly popular with voters writ large, non-Fox viewers, as lots of people in the professional political class seem to believe. Fernand Amandi is a veteran Democratic strategist and pollster based in Miami, and he joins me now. Fernand, first, I'm curious how this is all filtering through Florida media and Florida politics, particularly given the state has so many folks, from Cuba and Venezuela who have made their own treacherous journeys away from regimes they viewed as tyrannical, which is what these Venezuelans, flown to Martha's Vineyard were doing, and how that's played out there.
Well, Chris, first off, this conversation we're having tonight is possible because a Florida governor 60 years ago allowed my parents and grandparents to come into this country seeking asylum from a socialist totalitarian regime as lawful exiles seeking political asylum. So the fact that this becomes, for the first time in 60 years, really a disruption of what has been the constant Republican policy in Florida. If you come from Cuba, if you come from Venezuela, if you come from Nicaragua and you're seeking relief from these socialist totalitarian regimes, you can live the American dream and experience that in free Florida. That, I think, has caused shockwaves here in the state. So to the extent, is it being well received? We're not necessarily going to know that until empirical data comes out showing that DeSantis is either losing support in the polls or on election day if people are just taking the quiet way of expressing a protest vote. But right now, I think there is a lot of angst, there is a lot of concern, and a lot of folks, candidly, Chris, have been chilled into silence because if there's one thing we know about Ron DeSantis is he does not mind exerting political revenge on anybody who dares to challenge him.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about DeSantis clearly has this sort of playbook here. Pick these sort of big culture war fights that are kind of in the zeitgeist of Fox News, arresting people who his own state told they could vote lawfully, sending a SWAT team to one of them, sending these migrants to a, island off Massachusetts, passing a anti-woke bill. But all that just feels to me like it's sort of easy. It's easy enough for him to kind of gain currency with the folks in Fox. It's not like he's some political colossus in Florida where he's running up like Charlie Baker or Larry Hogan numbers of 75% approval.
He's really not. But again, we have to understand what is the ultimate motivator here for Ron DeSantis. He has made the calculation, Chris, that his reelection is assured. He thinks it's a sure thing. He thinks it's a slam dunk. And as such, his prize right now that his eyes are laser locked on is the 2024 Republican nomination for president. So he's trying to win the MAGA Republican primary. And at the same time, in his own twisted, warped, cynical way, imagining that he's also doing a conversation changer. You and I are not talking about the decision now to overturn Dobbs and the impact that that decision will have on millions of American women across the country, because DeSantis doesn't want to talk about that either. So they have deliberately, I think, changed the subject to what they think is more fertile ground for them, which is the immigration issue.
Yeah, DeSantis literally ran away from a microphone about a week and a half ago when he was asked to follow up about what exactly level of abortion restrictions he supports in Florida. He still is basically keeping that secret for people, although I would tell the voters of Florida, if you think this guy's going to try to get the Republican primary in 2024, one way he's going to try to do that is maximal abortion restrictions if the incentives align. So, I know that he's been a little cagey about that, but at some point there's going to be a decision made, and the folks in Florida are going to have to deal with it.
Well, absolutely. And especially when you consider, Chris, that his opponent, Charlie Crist, has staked this election out in Florida. He said the first thing he will do as governor is enshrine legislation and veto anything that speaks to an abortion ban in the state of Florida to protect reproductive choice. But again, DeSantis also can read the polls. He's very Machiavellian in that regard.
Yep.
He knows that the abortion issue is kryptonite for him. So the less he talks about that,
right,
and the more he can stay on the grievance culture war topics like immigration and scapegoating people of color, that's friendly terrain in his judgment.
Yeah, and this is why, this is literally the appeal, right? Is that someone who has a sort of instinct for culture war fights without the same shooting himself in the foot as Trump is what they're looking for. Again, I think it's a little early to say that this guy is like some incredible political instincts. We'll see how this continues to play out. Fernand Amandi, thank you very much.